afraid of the dark.
In the early 2000s, when I was a young teenager, around 12 to 13 years old, I found myself navigating the social dynamics of middle school, a time when friendships and peer interactions were of utmost importance. It was during this period that I encountered a girl named Alice, who would become a central figure in a story that still sends shivers down my spine when I recall it. Alice was a student in my grade, but we had never really interacted until that fateful year when MSN Messenger was all the rage among teenagers. Alice was an overweight girl, often the target of cruel taunts and teasing from our classmates, and it seemed that her home life wasn't much better, with hints of a troubled family situation. Despite these warning signs, I felt compelled to be kind to her, perhaps sensing that she needed a friend. One Friday afternoon, as I stood at the bus stop, waiting for my ride to my dad's house for the weekend, Alice approached me. She was a familiar face from my friend group, but we hadn't had many personal conversations. Alice suggested that I hang out with her at her grandparents' house, a proposal that caught me off guard. I politely declined, explaining that I was on my way to my dad's place, and we had plans to go to the movies with my younger siblings later that evening. However, Alice was persistent, and her enthusiasm made me hesitate. After a brief moment of deliberation, I decided to call my dad from the school office, seeking his permission to change plans. To my surprise, he agreed, and I found myself walking with Alice to her grandparents' home, located in the same neighborhood as my school. We strolled through the familiar streets, chatting casually, and I began to feel more at ease in her company. Alice seemed genuinely happy to have me as her companion, and I felt a sense of camaraderie, despite our brief acquaintance. Upon arriving at her house, Alice immediately headed towards her laptop, eager to sign into her MSN Messenger account. I sat beside her, curious about her online activities, as this was a world I had only recently begun to explore. Her contact list was a mystery to me, filled with names I didn't recognize, and when I inquired about them, Alice casually mentioned that she had made a lot of friends online. This concept was foreign to me, and I found it intriguing yet slightly unsettling. Almost instantly, Alice's MSN account came to life as numerous people began messaging her. Among them was a guy who went by the name of James, and his personal message, displayed prominently, declared his affection for Alice, referring to her as a sexy babe. This public display of affection made me feel uncomfortable, and I began to question the nature of their relationship. James, sensing Alice's presence online, immediately asked if she was with a friend, and he requested that she turn on her webcam so he could see me. Alice obliged, and I found myself on display, feeling exposed and uneasy. James, however, did not turn on his webcam, and his refusal to show his face only heightened my suspicions. He began making suggestive comments, complimenting my appearance and even suggesting that I remove my sweater, which made me cringe. His messages became increasingly inappropriate, hinting at a threesome and making passes at me, which I didn't fully understand at the time. I asked Alice why James wasn't turning on his webcam, and she claimed that he didn't have one, further fueling my suspicions. Feeling uncomfortable and wanting to escape the situation, I suggested that we go outside and play with her rabbit, a pet I had noticed in the backyard. Alice, however, seemed reluctant to leave the computer, and James's messages became more insistent, almost angry, as he tried to convince Alice to stay online. I could sense the manipulation in his words, and it only reinforced my desire to get away from the screen. Eventually, I decided to go outside alone, leaving Alice to deal with James. I found solace in the company of the rabbit, stroking its soft fur and enjoying the peacefulness of the backyard. After a while, Alice joined me outside, and I could tell that something was amiss. She explained that she and James had gotten into a fight but had made up, and he was now planning to visit her in person on the upcoming Friday. He wanted the three of us to hang out together, which I found odd, especially since I had never directly spoken to him. My instincts were telling me that something wasn't right, but as a middle schooler, I didn't want to overthink the situation, so I brushed off my concerns. The rest of the evening passed uneventfully, and my dad picked me up as planned. I didn't give much thought to the encounter with James until Sunday when I returned to my mom's place. I logged into my MSN account and noticed a friend request from someone I didn't recognize. Assuming it was a classmate, I accepted the request, only to be greeted by a message from none other than James. His message was inappropriate and made me feel uncomfortable, so I quickly blocked him and logged off. The following Monday at school, Alice approached me during lunch, excitedly telling me that James had really liked me and was definitely coming to visit on Friday. She asked if we were still on board with hanging out, but I made up an excuse, saying I had to go to my dad's again. Alice seemed disappointed but didn't push the issue further. I felt a sense of relief as I boarded the bus, glad to have avoided an uncomfortable situation. Little did I know, the following Friday would be a day of high drama and tension at our school. As we settled into our classrooms, the school went into lockdown mode, with students being instructed to remain in their rooms and keep the lights on. Everyone assumed it was a drill, and we quietly continued with our work, unaware of the unfolding events. Between classes, a vice principal approached me and asked me to accompany him to the office. I was confused and a bit nervous, but I followed him, wondering what was going on. Upon arriving, I saw a guidance counselor and a female police officer waiting for me. They informed me that they had a few questions to ask and I could call my parents if I wished. I declined, unsure of what was happening. The vice principal began by asking if I knew Alice, to which I replied affirmatively. He then inquired about a guy named James, and I told him that I didn't know anyone by that name, but Alice did. That's when they dropped the bombshell. James was not a 16-year-old boy, as Alice had led me to believe, but a 40-something-year-old man named Tom. I was shocked and terrified, realizing the gravity of the situation. I told them everything I knew, which wasn't much, and they let me go. I later learned that Tom had shown up at the school, claiming to be Alice's uncle and insisting on seeing her due to an emergency. The school receptionist, suspicious of his story, asked for proof, but he had none. He became enraged, demanding to see Alice and claiming that I could vouch for him. The school staff refused and called the police, leading to the lockdown. The man's behavior in the office was erratic, and he was eventually arrested. I was horrified, thinking about what could have happened to Alice if he had succeeded in meeting her. It became clear to me that he had been manipulating her online, knowing details about her life in school. Thankfully, the school's quick actions had prevented a potentially dangerous situation. In the aftermath of this incident, I decided to distance myself from Alice as I became aware of her involvement in other risky behaviors. It was a difficult decision, but I felt it was necessary for my own well-being. This experience taught me valuable lessons about online safety, the importance of trusting my instincts, and the potential dangers that lurk in the digital world. It was a stark reminder that not everything and everyone is as they seem, and that caution and vigilance are essential in navigating the complexities of adolescence. In the year 2002, when I was just 12 years old, I embarked on what I thought would be an ordinary walk home from school, a journey I had undertaken countless times before. It was around 3 p.m., the sun was shining brightly, and I had no reason to suspect that this day would be any different from the countless others I had experienced. My middle school was located about a mile away from my house, and the route home was one I knew like the back of my hand. The path was lined with familiar faces, friends and neighbors, and various mom and pop shops, creating a sense of safety and community. As I strolled along the somewhat busy street, bathed in the warm sunlight, I passed by an insurance office and a convenience store, typical landmarks on my journey. It was then that I noticed a homeless man standing on the corner, a sight not uncommon in my part of town, where aging hippies and burnouts often sought handouts during the day. These men were usually harmless, content with a simple request for change and a shrug if you declined. Unfazed by his presence, I continued on my way, offering a casual greeting as I walked by. However, as I walked past him and started up the hill, I heard footsteps behind me, accompanied by guttural, incoherent mutterings. It seemed he was trying to get my attention, but I had been taught not to engage with strangers, especially those who appeared intoxicated. I quickened my pace, my heart racing with a mix of fear and determination to outwalk him. Despite my efforts, he only increased his speed, matching my stride. Before I knew it, I was jogging, my heavy backpack and sandals hindering my ability to run. He closed the distance between us, and in a terrifying moment, he grabbed my arm and spun me around. The stench of weed and alcohol on his breath was overwhelming. He pushed me into the bushes beside an apartment complex, and just as he was about to lean in, a car screeched to a halt on the curb. A woman's voice shouted, "Get off!" Startled, the man released his grip, and I seized the opportunity to scramble out of the bushes and run towards the car. The woman behind the wheel, a stranger to me, opened the passenger door and urged me to get in, assuring me that she wouldn't hurt me and that I needed to escape from the creep. I hurriedly got into the car, and she sped off, telling me to call the police as soon as I got home. My mother wasn't due back from work until 7 p.m., so I shared my experience with a trusted neighbor, whom we were instructed to contact in case of emergencies. I called the police dispatcher, who calmly took down my statement, my voice trembling with adrenaline and shock. About an hour later, the police called back, informing me that they had apprehended the man who had attacked me. They asked if they could come to my house to take my statement, but I explained that I would have to wait until my mother returned from picking up my sister from her job, which was an hour away. The police agreed that I could provide my statement the following day. The man they had caught was a local drunk, notorious in the area. While he had mostly been harmless in the past, his recent descent into harder drugs like crystal meth had led to increased violence and petty thefts in the neighborhood. This incident marked the first time he had attempted something so dangerous, and I was grateful for the quick actions of the woman who had come to my rescue. In the early 1970s, my mom had a frightening experience while riding the school bus in 6th grade. Since they lived outside of town, she took the bus daily, often sitting with her boyfriend, holding hands innocently. The bus driver, noticing their affection, began making inappropriate comments, asking about their kissing and even inquiring about sniffing her underwear. Uncertain how to react, they tried to ignore him. On the last day of school, the bus driver deviated from the usual route. He skipped my mom's stop and continued driving, refusing to let her off at the next stops, despite her attempts to get off with her friends. Terrified and in tears, she moved to the back of the bus, creating an obstacle with her books, hoping to buy time if he approached her. As the bus ventured deeper into the woods, my mom decided to escape through the back emergency door if the bus slowed down. Glancing out the window, she spotted her dad and older brother tailing the bus in their truck. She yelled at the driver to stop, revealing her dad was behind them. The driver complied, but my mom, frozen with fear, couldn't move. Her dad boarded the bus, positioning himself near the driver, allowing her to exit and get into the truck with her brother. As my mom sat in the truck, she witnessed her dad angrily confronting the driver. Her dad's tight embrace upon her return to the truck made her realize the gravity of the situation. The other kids on the bus, witnessing her distress, informed their parents, who then contacted my grandparents. Although my grandparents never reported the incident to the police or school, they discussed it with the bus company owner, and the driver was never seen again. My mom suspects her dad threatened the driver, which is why it was never reported. The details of their conversation remain a secret my grandfather took to his grave. Years later, a chilling revelation emerged. My mom learned from her mother-in-law, Grandma C., that the bus driver had been imprisoned for impregnating his 14-year-old stepdaughter. This shocking discovery confirmed that the same man had abducted my mom all those years ago, a secret she had unknowingly kept until then.